Ngā mihi nui me te mata tātou. Moreno tātou. Kia ora, aka hoa me te whānau putaio. Ko John Roach tōku ingoa. Ko te kai toho toa mātanga putaio mātua me te pau whakaheri ki te mahi aha whanua, ki te manatu aha mātua. Kia tia ho me te araha me te harakoa I au neo rā. He whakamahana I te whatamanua me te kainga. Kia noho pūmau o hoa kia koe, aha koa haere koe ki hea. Galasa grog scora de lahanta, agus gadishid de chrias di hak. Grev corde bundilisha gutsa, kibi art darakfa. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Roach. For those of you I don't know, I'm the Chief Science Advisor at the Ministry for Primary Industries and the Establishment Director of On-Farm Support, and it's my pleasure to chair the first session this morning. I started with a greeting, which I'll having said it, having probably butchered it in Te Reo and offered it up, Asqueil, out of respect for my tupuna, I'll tell you what it is in Berla, in English. May love and laughter light your days and warm your heart and homes. May good and faithful friends be yours wherever you may roam. And that's just to set us up for today, and hopefully we have a great discussion and enjoy it as much as we did yesterday. So I've just heard that the Minister has arrived and he'll be up with us in a few minutes. So I just want to welcome you to day 2 on behalf of the NZACCC and MPI. Again, we will be running the live question and answer sessions after each speaker through the conference app, and I'll be trying to feed those questions in, so please keep those questions coming. Make me look good, keep them clean. And yeah, I'm just hoping that escalator is working. Don't you just love dramatic pauses? I'd tell a joke, except I'd probably get myself in trouble. Obviously, I speak a little bit more quickly than most people walk. Excellent. And so without further ado, look, it's my pleasure to introduce the first speaker of the day, the Honourable Damian O'Connor, our Minister of Agriculture. Minister O'Connor believes every New Zealander, regardless of their background or family situation, deserves the opportunity to realise their full potential and participate in their community and society. He stands for the values of equality and opportunity and for the responsibility we owe to each other to maintain these values. Now, Minister O'Connor whakapapas to farming stock and the whenua that sustains us all. His background in farming and adventure tourism drives his view that we need well-paid, sustainable jobs and industry growth to improve our future. He is a passionate advocate for rural communities and for a thriving agricultural sector. He was first elected to Parliament in 1993, and that was but anyway, 1993, and has served as a minister in both the 5th and 6th Labour governments. So, Minister, it's my welcome you on board.
Kia ora, John, and God knows what I have to follow on from Irish jokes and intro like that. But anyway, kia ora, thank you very, very much for the opportunity to come along and say a few words. And I probably as the least technical person in the room, it's a bit daunting, really. I go back to, I guess, my history a little, and that is off a farm where we chopped down all the trees to create some grass. In the hope that it would feed the family. I think that's what my father, his ambition was. There were some discussions around sustainable agriculture at the time and sustainable forestry as well, that we could sustainably harvest some of the indigenous forests. And my thinking, deep technical thinking at the time was, well, the trees, the gorse certainly did, and the trees grew back on the West Coast as long as you had the soil, kept the soil, and you had an atmosphere that was kind of pretty clean. And at that time, we had acid rain in Europe. That was the kind of pollution consideration, acid rain. And I thought, well, we don't have that, so we're pretty good as a country. And we just have to move forward in that way. That was my sustainability consideration. We've come a long way from that time. And CO2, of course, is called a pollutant. In fact, Minister Shaw was here yesterday saying it was a pollutant. I've never used that term for CO2 because I come off a farm that successfully took CO2 and nitrogen from the atmosphere and turned it into animal protein. And we did that through legumes and ryegrass. And we still do that. When I was farming back in the 80s, we did that really successfully. In fact, we were the most efficient at doing that in the world. But I remember going to a field day and being told, look, the figures might be a bit wrong, but saying, look, if you put on $1 worth of urea, you'll get $4.50 worth of milk. And that was kind of the message that went out at the time when we were really ramping up the use of nitrogen across our economy. And from that time, we've moved on to intensify to the point now where we've got huge investment in housing and other things in agriculture. And even at an $8 payout, some farmers are saying that's not enough. So my simple theory is can we go back to basics? The other reality that we're facing is that things are going to change. There'll always be disruption. You may have expected, as you would have in the past, to have a politician come along with a suit and tie. Well, I'm not. And who knows what other changes or unusual things you will expect to see in day-to-day life or in your business operations or indeed as a government. Cyclone Gabriel is a wake-up call for us all and the events that precluded that. I think now, if you talk about climate change across this country, with a few exceptions, most people will accept that it's a reality and that we probably have contributed to it as humans. In fact, we know that. And my wake-up call was being in Europe again and looking at the autobahns. Just thousands and thousands of cars every minute and trucks, and thinking never before in civilization have we taken hydrocarbons from the earth and put them into the atmosphere in this way. Look, I as I say, am not one to bring technical expertise to this forum, to offer a few opinions and answer a few questions. I'm also Minister of Trade, and I just pulled out some figures actually that might be useful. Last year, there was $1 trillion in subsidies for fossil fuel extraction and utilisation across the globe. And there was $817 billion estimated of subsidies for agricultural production. Now, some of that might be for food security, but arguably you could say that it might be inefficient use of the resources to produce food that could be better produced elsewhere or in different ways. These are the challenges that we all face as we're moving into the future. So the little part that I can play, I guess, as Minister of Ag, and we're talking about ag and climate change, is to try and facilitate discussion and to encourage us all to move in the right direction. Now, I've got a formal speech here that I could read out to you. I'll try and go through it as quickly as I can so that I can answer questions. The notes say we've done an incredible amount of work reducing agricultural emissions since I was last here. I changed the notes to try and reduce and to move in that, because I'm not quite sure that we have reduced hugely, certainly not across transport, all parts of our economy. We're still struggling to make the reductions that we know are needed as we move into the future. As I said, Cyclone Gabriel was a wake-up call for us all, and it's, of course, the focus of the country, the focus of everyone in the primary sectors at the moment, but some also seeing it as an excuse to slow action in areas of climate change. We've, of course, had a Centre for Climate Action on Agricultural Emissions for a wee while, and we've kind of boosted that. Last year we put $338 million to accelerate all the actions that we have been working on. And of course, we established a new Centre for Climate Action on Agricultural Emissions, and that was launched at the Field Days with the former Prime Minister. We're trying to shift the dial on farm sector emissions and trying to get some tools, not just developed, but actually into the hands of farmers. As I say, the centre's made up of two key elements, and one is, of course, the New Zealand Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Research Centre, which has been operating for some time. I look around the room here and see some people connected to it. A lot of great work occurring in that area. But we've got a new Centre for Climate Action joint venture, which is some of the companies, and I'll be here, stepping up to partner with government to actually really dig into some of that research, develop some of the technologies, and, as I say, get them into the hands of the farmers. We announced $27 million straight up for that, inhibiting bolus in areas of that, low methane rams, and of course making sure that we have greenhouse gas measurement tools available. So what I'm about to do today, well, I'm doing it now actually, it might be easier, is to announce another $9 million to go into these areas. There's $9 million, actually it's more than that, $9 million to support 15 PhD students and 12 postdoctoral fellows over 6 years. The development of greenhouse gas capability plan to identify and meet other key capability needs. So that hopefully will go to some of the brightest minds to move us in the right direction. We're also investing $350,000 to build on the current research programs into methane vaccines. Also, another $200,000 research on the effect of plantain has on nitrous oxide emissions. And in fact, we've seen some very interesting outcomes in that area. Again, the technical experts will be here, so I best not don't go too far down that track. But it's quite exciting, and obviously is one more tool that farmers are looking to refer to. As I say, the Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Research Centre has been critical in bringing a New Zealand perspective into the research on agricultural greenhouse gas emissions, and a lot of work has gone on, genetic selection for lower methane animals, nitrous oxide research focusing on inhibitors, and of course something that I'm really passionate about is progressing the soil carbon program and future farm systems. When I first came into the job, the little bit I learned from Lincoln, or the bit that I remembered and was passionate about, was soil carbon. And indeed at Paris there was an initiative launched, and the summary of which goes something like, if we just increase carbon across all our soil, a relatively small amount, we could sequester a huge amount of carbon from the atmosphere into the ground and put it to good use. I absolutely buy into that. The kind of pushback I get from officials, it's really hard to do. We've got really high carbon soil levels in our country, and so it's not worth the effort, Minister. Well, I think it is. And I think what we can learn, we can share with the rest of the world. And clearly there are other continents, one very close, that to even the least observant person could see that there's not a lot of carbon and a lot of soil in Australia. And the potential to sequester more and build up the organic matter is huge. And if we can share that with Africa and other parts of the world, then maybe we really will start to drag down the carbon from the atmosphere and reverse the global warming that we are seeing here. We are supporting farmers in many, many ways. Effectively, $1 billion was committed last year to help farmers on-farm support programs, which are very, very useful, I have to say, in Tairāwhiti and Hawke's Bay at the moment. We've got people from MPI, good people who are out on the ground in the regions, gathering information, but also connecting to farmers who are not part of discussion groups, who are not paying for advisors, who are in many ways disconnected from the world in which we're moving into. So we've got teams in Northland, Taranaki, Nelson Marlborough, Bay of Plenty. We'll be rolling them out right through the country, and they have been playing a vital role in as I say, the response initially in the Hawke's Bay, in Northland, and hopefully in the recovery. Look, on pricing emissions, there will have been some discussion here. He waka eke noa is government's attempt to reach out to industry, to have a discussion, listen to them, what ideas they have to commit New Zealand to an emissions reduction pathway, given that 48% of our emissions do come from the agricultural sector. And I understand that the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment will be speaking after me. I can't see him. There he is. Oh, there he is. He's got a mask on. And I think it was Simon who committed us to, in 1997, I mean, he's as a minister, New Zealand to including agricultural emissions in our efforts internationally. And that was the right thing to do, given it's a big part of our profile. The challenge of how we do that has been one still yet to be completely resolved and agreed on. But we made some adjustments in December last year to clearly state that we'll include all sequestration on farm, that will start with our lower price, keeping in mind the reality that we need enough money to put back into R&D and to really get ahead of this. And we have legislation that Minister Shaw would have referred to that if that doesn't occur, then agriculture comes into the ETS. Look, I probably answer some questions on that if there are any in that area. It's still a challenging area. As I say, some see the cyclone and a few other things as an excuse to park that up and delay that further. I'm not enthusiastic about that. You will have heard, or you will hear today from people in the market, be it Tesco's, Nestle, Danone, all of these big multinational corporates that looking at either scope 3 or just market signals in the supermarket as to how they can reduce emissions in the products that they're supplying to their customers and their consumers. That reality is something we face, and having just come back from Japan, a country that's not necessarily focused on sustainability in the way we may have thought, but is focused on high quality and is addressing the issues around energy. They may be a little later to the party, but what they see in Europe and in the US in terms of direction of travel is now being brought to play in terms of their retail and their supply chains. So look, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words, and I think there is some time for questions. But once again, thank you to each and every one of you who has played a part in this challenging area of climate change and agriculture. If I go back to the point I made at the start, if we could have a system that just used legumes for nitrogen, that just used better ryegrasses and other pasture species like plantain to sequester carbon from the soil, and cut down on some of the additional inputs, then the profitability for farming may be the same. The total production may be affected, which was one of the points made when it came to he waka eke noa. But as a farmer, in the 80s, when subsidies came off, we were told to stop farming for capital gains and production and start farming for profits. And we've kind of taken our eye off that goal because there's been a lot of incentive to just drive production. So I want to see a sustainable, profitable agricultural system in our country, and that will mean change and disruption, whether we like it or not, is something we will face. Climatic, international markets, market trends, staffing, immigration, global travel, all of those things will be disrupted, and our ability to adapt to that will be the measure of our success into the future. So thank you very, very much, and happy to answer some questions. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Minister. Thank you very much for that. We're using modern technology with questions today, Minister. So I've got them here in front of me, and and it's working. People are asking questions, so that's always good too. The first one is very similar to the one I wrote down, just in case nobody asked you a question. So I'll ask that one first. Are there any risks or trade barriers if we are unsuccessful in our goal of reducing methane emissions?
Not immediate, but if I take our single biggest company, their single biggest customer, it's Nestlé. They have committed to eliminate emissions from their supply chains. I'm not sure how they will apply that to their individual suppliers, but clearly those kinds of signals mean that there are some risks emerging. We may face some barriers. And I can tell you quite honestly, in having negotiated, I guess, the UK trade agreement, EU, and you know, we've upgraded the China free trade agreement. For the most part, people don't necessarily want our products. There are a few traders who like clipping the ticket and shifting them into market, but most of the farmers in market or others involved in the country kind of are not overly enthusiastic, I have to say. We will have to, you know, and the 40 million or thereabouts people we can feed, I guess is a small number compared to the global population. So our contribution to global food security is not huge in quantum. In technology, yes, I believe we can play a better part. Come back to the point, we're going to have to be at the forefront, as we have been in the past, of food safety, food quality, premiumisation, marketing. We'll have to do that. And then, as Scope 3 or other considerations come to play in the minds of customers or consumers, as I say, we've got to make sure that we've got to have good stories. So immediately, probably not. Over time, if we ignore this, we do so at our own peril and at risk to future generations.
Thank you, Minister. Second question was, New Zealand farming lost agricultural subsidies in the 1980s. I think lost is a choice word there, but anyway. Do you see any future where subsidies may play a part in New Zealand agriculture to help low emissions technologies take off?
I guess we have been subsidising them. You know, we put $300 million in. There's been a bit of taxpayers' money into subsidies. You have to accept that's what they are. We would say it's wise investment. But over time, as we roll that out and ramp those up, what we've said with the proposal with He Waka is that the levy that we will gather should go back into that R&D and into the distribution and development of those things. And that's what we want. This is not a tax for government coffers. This is about how we invest in our future. And so, yeah, that's what I would like to see occur, rather than a constant handout from taxpayers to, firstly, keep systems going for as long as they can, as they are, and then kind of only change when you have to, which is often too late. Market signals are often far too late. Trends, if you can pick up on them, offer huge opportunities, and that's where we should be.
Fantastic. Two other questions. One of them, and this is asking you to really look out. What will New Zealand land use look like in 2950? I'm presuming that should have been 2050, and the person has thumbs like mine. So let's go with 2050 rather than 2950, Minister.
Hoping I might be around. Yeah, okay. I'm not sure. I know that. We'll take one example. Growing up as a kid, we went to Tūtaki Valley, to Rangawaiwai, had relations up there. Tūtaki Valley was really hard country. Mr Muldoon had offered subsidies and they'd cleared a bit more land. But, you know, even sheep farming was hard yakka. There's a big station up there. And then, of course, with the dairy boom, they converted one of these big farms into milk about 2,000 to 3,000 cows. Today it's in hops, $100 million investment. Hops in the base of the Southern Alps. Who would have believed it? Never say never, I say. And so I'm not quite sure. I know that because of the absence of subsidies and the innovation that we've seen in the past, we've seen massive land use change, afforestation in the 90s, deforestation in the early 2000s, and now we're seeing a bit more afforestation. We've seen sheep into dairy, we've seen sheep into deer, and we're seeing dairy into horticulture. I don't know. I think we do have a responsibility as politicians to minimise the potential risks going forward. Forestry is a 30-year cycle or 25 to 30-year cycle. We've got to make sure we don't end up with permanent radiata forests that will fall over when they get to about 80 years of age, because that's what they do, and create massive environmental downsides. So we're trying to get the settings there right, without interfering directly in the property rights of New Zealanders to buy and sell and adapt and change their land use.
Thank you, Minister. Hops are my favourite vegetable, I have to tell you. That's
Mine too.
5 portions a day gives me my 5 plus. There's a question here. I know food safety isn't in your portfolio anymore, Minister, but it's no doubt of interest. So there's a question here that acknowledges that there's a huge amount of support from MPI and from the government on developing inhibitors, etc., but that the regulatory hurdles are quite challenging. Do you think our risk settings are right?
Yes, I do. I know the issue around the technology we're talking about. We've just got to make sure if we can get the MRLs in market, and we've done the research and we know that this level is safe, up to this level is safe, that's fine. But just to charge off, and it will be one of the challenges into the future. And there was a question came up yesterday to Minister Shaw about GE, or GM, or call it what you like, and hopefully you've all read the report that has come out recently. All aware of it? Who's aware of it? Oh, that's right, yeah. Thought that. Te Puna Whakaronui, Lane Jager and the crew have put out 3 reports, one on food systems, the second on alternative proteins, and one they've just put out on genetic engineering. Simon's probably read it a couple of times. Should have. It's a useful discussion document, and you will appreciate that it's a very sensitive area. And it is a discussion document. It doesn't make recommendations, but it's trying to move us along the path of a mature conversation in an area where we have some expertise, but some risks as well. And so, the effect on our products in market is something we always absolutely have to keep in mind. As I say, most people are looking for an excuse to lock us out of markets. So, anything that surprises them or we haven't worked through with MRLs, etc., is a risk to us as a nation. Thanks. Kia ora.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for spending valuable time with us. I know how busy your portfolio is in ordinary times, never mind in the extraordinary times that we're dealing with now.